For those who don't know, I am incredibly accident-prone. I've never had any sort of grace, and in fact, it's a miracle I've never broken any bones. But one thing I do end up with are lots of cuts and scrapes. And we end up keeping quite a supply of the topic of today's episode in the house at all times. From the ubiquitous first aid kit staple to an 80s supergroup to Penny Lane and her friends in the movie Almost Famous, the episode is a little all over the place. But don't worry, I'll try to stick to the topic as much as possible. I'm your host, Emily Prokop, and this is the story behind the Band-Aid. But first, a quick message. In case you missed it, the story behind will be turned into a book, with an expected release date in the fall of 2018. And if you want to find out more information, get updates, hopefully discounts, and pre-ordering information, there will be a link in the show notes, or go to thestorybehindpodcast.com/book-updates. I'm so excited for this book, and as a thank you for signing up for email updates, you'll get a sneak peek into chapters I already have outlined, which includes some future episodes of The Story Behind. So visit thestorybehindpodcast.com to find out more. Back in 1920, Josephine Dixon may have been me in a past life because she was also very prone to frequently getting minor cuts and burns around the house. When she would get these injuries, the choices she had to take care of them weren't very easy. If it was an infomercial, you would see someone in black and white leaving the cuts open, risking infection, or trying to wrap a piece of gauze around her fingers and tying them with just one hand, or attempting to construct a makeshift bandage. And in that infomercial, someone would inevitably say, "There's got to be a better way." Well, it just so happened her husband, Earl Dixon, was a cotton buyer for Johnson & Johnson and had access to surgical tape and bandages. With the addition of a stiff fabric known as crinoline that was used in petticoats that kept the gauze sanitary, the two of them stuck cut pieces of bandages onto pre-cut strips of surgical tape to come up with the prototype to what we now know today as the Band-Aid. By the way, Band-Aid is a brand name. Actually, Band-Aid brand Adhesive Bandages is their formal name. You would think Band-Aids would have taken off immediately, but like Post-its that we talked about in the last episode, they were slow to catch on. It wasn't until Johnson & Johnson supplied them free to none other than the Boy Scouts of America for their first aid kits that they took off. Boy Scouts would have them in a package attached to their belts and use them as a way to earn their first aid merit badges. And when other companies tried to crowd the adhesive bandage market in the 1950s, Johnson & Johnson were quick to make sure their product would blow the others out of the water by making sure they were the stickiest, even showing this feature in a commercial where Band-Aids would stick to an egg in boiling water.
Touch the egg with any other bandage. Brand X, brand Y, brand Z. Not one sticks. But a Band-Aid plastic strip with new Super Stick sticks tight instantly. No pressure, yet we can lift the egg, even boil it. And the Band-Aid plastic strip never comes loose. Yes, even in hot, soapy dishwater. Neat, flesh-colored, almost invisible.
One thing Johnson & Johnson was a little blind to was the fact that they touted their bandages as flesh-colored in that commercial, when back then they only came in one color, a pinkish beige. Michael Paniotis had the inspiration to create adhesive bandages to cater to the Black and Hispanic population, called Ebonaids. The boxes came with adhesive bandages in shades called honey beige, cinnamon, coffee brown, and black licorice. Unfortunately, when stores would buy these bandages to sell, most of them would place them on shelves with products specifically for Black people, instead of with the other boxes of adhesive bandages, and they were a bust. Johnson & Johnson have since started making clear bandages in an effort to help them blend with any skin tone. If you're listening to this when it comes out, you're probably confused by the Christmas music playing, especially a song that's apparently one of the least favorite holiday songs out there. But I couldn't do an episode about the Band-Aid without mentioning one of the biggest collaborations of musicians ever that took place on a cold day in November of 1984, when Bob Geldof of the Boomtown Rats and Midge Ure of Ultravox collaborated to write a song after seeing reports of starvation and famine in Ethiopia, contacting some of the best-known musicians of England and Ireland to record, and they called their supergroup Band-Aid. They had only 24 hours of studio time to record, mix, and release the song, and somehow they got more than 30 musicians and bands on board to do so, including Sting, George Michael, Bono, Phil Collins, Duran Duran, Spandau Ballet, and Boy George, who was actually in New York that morning and was woken up by Geldof after having slept in, and hopped on a Concorde to get to the studio last minute to record his vocals. But it was worth it. The supergroup raised $8 million with the release of the record. Even when it looked like the British government was going to impose taxes on the single, Geldof stood up to the Prime Minister at the time, Margaret Thatcher, who still collected the tax, known as VAT, but then donated the revenue from that tax to relief efforts. This wasn't the only time Band-Aids appeared in music, or I should say pop culture. Kate Hudson's character Penny Lane from the 2000 Cameron Crowe movie Almost Famous touted herself and her friends as Band-Aids, as opposed to groupies. And if you know me, you know I love a good play on words, which is probably why this movie ranks up there as one of my favorites. Information for this episode was sourced from Bandaid.com, The Atlantic, the documentary Band-Aid, the Song That Rocked the World, and more links which can be found in the show notes at thestorybehindpodcast.com. Congratulations to Martin Donison, who won a Story Behind prize pack when we played the Post-it giveaway in the Story Behind discussion group on Facebook. And if you want access to future giveaways, there will be a link in the show notes so you can join the discussion group. Also, check out Heather Welch's Sunshine Summit, where I will be a guest March 13th, and the summit runs from March 9th to the 16th, so I'd love it if you went over and checked out some of the fantastic guests and podcasting friends she has scheduled, like Stephen and SP from Better Podcasting, Bandrew Scott from the Podcastage YouTube channel, Adam Higgins from Odd Dad Out, Nick Haskins from Epic Film Guys and Restaurant Podcast, and more. And there will be links in the show notes for more information, or visit sunshineandpowercuts.com. This episode was brought to you by the Story Behind executive producers who support the show through the Patreon page at patreon.com/thestorybehind. Thanks for listening.